Welcome to Grant Warehaus, and the Zappa series continues. BM Boldt is back, and we are looking at Zappa in New York from 1977. Let's get started. Let's do it.
Grant is changing the world one track at a time on Grant's Rock Warehouse.
Welcome to Grant's Rock Warehouse, and tonight I want to welcome BM Boldt to the channel. Tonight we are continuing our series on Frank Zappa, episode 23. Is that what you said?
Album 23. So
Album 23. We've combined a couple of them, but we've done at least 20 of these. So tonight we are looking at the album from 1976. We're looking at Zappa in New York. So I don't know. I'm just going to turn it over to Byron and let him start talking about it. And we're going to do our ratings, what we think of this record out of 10, and whether you should maybe check this record out if you haven't. So Byron, do you want to start us off on this?
Sure. I have a little bit of a cold, people, so bear with me. We'll get through this, I hope. So, yeah, this was recorded from December 26th to the 29th, 1976 in New York. This was the same week that band was on Saturday Night Live for the very first time. They were on it a couple years later as well. We got Frank, of course, Ray White, Eddie Jobson, Patrick O'Hearn, Terry Bozzio, Ruth Underwood. We get a lot of special guests. Don Pardo from Saturday Night Live MCs at times.
That's great.
You get Randy and Michael Brecker sitting in on these shows. And we get a bunch of the Saturday Night Live band horn section. Lou Marini, a couple other guys I can't think of my head. When this came out, Frank was in the middle of his lawsuit with Warner Brothers and Herb Cohen. We discussed that a little bit on the last episode, due to Lures. And so, yeah, Frank was suing Warner Brothers. He was suing Herb Cohen. Zoo Lures had come out on Warner Brothers. His only album that came out, and actually on Warner Brothers. But Frank submitted 4 albums to Warner Brothers in March of 77 to fulfill his contract. He wanted out.
Mm-hmm.
And one of them was the Zappa in New York. The others were Studio Tan, Sleep Dirt, and Orchestral Favorites. But Warner Brothers, they started dragging their feet about they didn't want to pay him all the money right away. They weren't really, they're taking the time trying to get this stuff released. So Frank said, well, screw it. I'm going to work out a deal with Phonogram to release most of this as the 4-album Lather. And I guess they even pressed up some test copies of that. Well, Warner Brothers heard about it. They threatened a lawsuit. So that got shelved. But then late 77, this finally did get released on Discreet, but it got pulled off the shelves. Apparently, there were some issues with possibly Punky Meadows related. It's hard to really say, but Warner Brothers pulled it. And so then they ended up editing the album down and censoring it. And it was finally released on March 3rd of 78.
Like this.
We'll discuss the whole censorship issue as we talk about some of the tracks. But all the CDs of this are basically the same, have the same tracks. So there's, I think, 6 tracks, I think, on disc 1 and I think 9 on disc 2. Basically, the CD is the uncensored version of the vinyl, plus 4 new tracks, which weren't on the vinyl. Hunky's Whips is apparently a different performance, though, than was on the original album. That is apparently on Lather. So if you have Lather, you'll hear the original version of Hunky's Whips.
Okay.
What you should have, though, is you should get the CD, any CD, because it's got all the original tracks, except minus the Hunky's Whips, plus 4 bonus tracks. And it'd be nice to really have the uncensored vinyl. Those are pretty hard to find, just to have it, There's a 40th anniversary 3 LP set and a 5 CD set. We don't really talk about the posthumous stuff on here, though. Down the road, maybe. Although I think we're going to be doing a little bit of something special here in the next few days.
Thursday, we will be looking at the Philadelphia album. It goes
hand in hand.
It goes hand in hand with this.
Same tour.
Mm-hmm.
So anyway, that gets us through all that. Let's talk a little bit about the songs.
Yeah.
Okay, so I'm going to go over this in the CD order of tracks, and we'll discuss whether it was on the original vinyl or if it got removed in the censored version and blah, 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 whatever. So the first disc we're going to start out with is first track is Titties and Beer. Can I say that?
Yeah. Well, you're doing it.
That's like 7 minutes and 36 seconds. It's kind of a funky R&B tune. It's about a biker played by Frank and his girlfriend riding up the mountains one night, and they stop, have a beer, and the devil, who's Terry Bozzio, steals the beer and eats Frank's girlfriend. So Frank and the devil, they kind of have this discussion over this backing vamp where Terry, the devil, is trying to make a deal to get Frank's soul. Frank's like, okay, yeah, you can have my soul. I don't really care. And that kind of scares Terry that Frank's willing to make a deal and get his beer and his girlfriend back. But this vamp, it's a little longer on the CD than it was on the vinyl, at least on the edited vinyl. There's some extra dialogue in there where they're talking about Punky Meadows, which we're going to talk about a little bit more tonight as we go along.
On the CD, I want to mention you can see Terry Bozzio wearing his devil mask when he's doing this song. So if you have that, they do have that documented here. So
if you ever watch the Baby Snakes movie, I think he wears it in there as well. We're not going to talk about that tonight. Excuse me.
But this has all the lyrics. I don't know if your CD has all the lyrics on it, but just to read the lyrics, it's just nuts. I mean, Titties and Beer is just crazy. I mean, it's very humorous because when I heard it, I went, this is kind of cute. And, you know, he does reference Dale Bozzio. She must be out in the audience. You hear that?
Yeah. Yeah, if he does, I know he does in at least one of the versions. So I'm familiar with quite a few versions of this track, so sometimes I get them confused as to which one is which, because every show is a little different. So yeah, he talks about Dale, I know, in at least one of them.
Mm-hmm.
So anyway, yeah, so the song is basically about that. And eventually Frank gets his girlfriend and his beer back. But I like that track a lot. This album does have its moments, though, where it can be a little crude, but I think that one's really kind of funny and
I think that
unique.
Titties and Beer is amusing. And I'm good for, most of the side. Well, it's a lot. This is a lot of album. I mean, I was worn out by the end of side 2. Because there's a lot of that type of humor throughout the whole record. Now, I like Terry Bozzio, and I think he's very entertaining, of course, as a drummer, but his interaction with Frank, him playing the devil, I think it's all cute. It's funny, but it is kind of crude. Frank eventually says, because I need a beer and it's titty squeezing time.
Who doesn't like beer and squeezing?
I guess, but anyway, keep going. I do like the way it starts out. I think it's a good way to start out.
All right. So the next track is going to be Cruising for Burgers. 9 minutes and 12 seconds. This was only on the CD version. So this was never on any of the vinyl.
Okay.
The track was originally on Uncle Meat. So we've discussed it in the past, but this version is really nothing like that at all. This one's a lot longer. It's instrumental. A lot of vocals on the Uncle Meat version. This one's faster. It's heavier. Rocks a little more. The synths kind of propel the song along, where there aren't any synths on the original version. It's got like a 6-minute guitar solo over like a 12/8 vamp. Pretty good. There's a lot of horns early on in this track too, and then even later on, playing this really complicated riff. You gotta love that about Zappa and his instrumentals. There's always these really cool, complicated sections. Go ahead.
But you did mention this. Randy Brecker, Mike Brecker. It's got Lou Marini on alto flute and alto sax. Ron Kuber, baritone sax, and Tom Malone. So it's an extensive horn section. And when you listen to this, that's one of the big things I think on this record that really stands out is how Frank uses the horns, a lot. It's impressive, I think.
One of the highlights of these shows is all the horns that are being used.
Definitely.
All right, the next track. I promise not to come in your mouth.
Right.
3.5 minutes. This song is also known as Lather on the Lather box. But you know what? The title is very crude, but it's a very lovely instrumental ballad, unlike the title completely. It's got a real delicate guitar solo in it. It's got a nice Jobson keyboard solo and some
Yeah.
real cool bass, I think, from Patrick O'Hearn.
That's one thing. Patrick O'Hearn, I want to make a, I'm glad you brought him up because I'm used to listening to him in Missing Persons. Now, that was a totally different animal. But
Keep talking.
man, to listen to him playing Zappa,
These are incredible albums with Patrick O'Hearn. They're kind of more like new age stuff. Oh man, they're so good though.
I didn't know
Got
he
that
had.
very 80s new age sound to it. All digital recordings, very sterile at times though, but just so good to listen to.
So
Anyway,
you would call that new age.
yes,
Okay.
new age.
But his bass playing on this record, holy crap, what a good player.
Oh yeah,
And he never really got to stretch his legs really in Missing Persons, who
no,
I'm used to it. Like I said, this, and if anybody's been following this series, you know that I'm kind of at this point, I didn't pay much attention to these records, so I'm just kind of going through, and these are my impressions as we go through this whole project. So I hadn't heard this record before. So, but man, he is a great, and I'm looking at his picture on here. He just looks like a baby. Doesn't he just look like a kid? He might be.
he and Bozio look young.
Yeah. Yeah. Love it. But yeah, he's a great bass player. Anyway, keep going. Go ahead.
All
Sorry.
right, so the next track is going to be Punky Swips at 10 minutes and 51 seconds. Okay, so we'd said the so the CD version here is allegedly a different performance than what was on the original vinyl, and what was on the original vinyl is apparently on lather. In this version, it starts out with Don Pardo doing an introduction, and so the song is basically about how Terry fell in love with a publicity picture of Punky Meadows. As you can see it there.
Right there, there's Terry, and then there's Punky Meadows. And he's doing the Punky Meadows look in the publicity picture.
And picture Don Pardo saying in the Don Pardo voice, in the photo, Punky was seen with a beautiful shiny hairdo and a semi-profile, which emphasized the pooched-out succulence of his insolent, pouting rictus. So anyway, so this song is long, like I mentioned. It has many changes in it.
Yeah.
It is heavy at times and complex at times.
Mm-hmm.
Terry's singing about how he pines for Punky Meadows, but he insists that he's not gay, despite being fond of chiffon.
Mm-hmm.
Also,
he's not
Punky
gay, but he's a fan of Punky.
Punky is more fluid than Jeff Beck as well.
I heard about that.
You've heard
I
this
mean,
song.
or is he talking? Is that in terms of guitar playing, or I don't understand?
A little bit of both, probably.
Probably,
But
maybe.
this song is top notch, in my opinion. I love this track.
But it's not very politically correct.
Hey,
I mean, a lot of this is pretty out
he's
there.
not gay, but there's nothing wrong with that.
I know, but you know.
But I really think it's probably the highlight of the album. I love it. It really rocks at times, man. And there's some really complicated stuff going on there too, and it's funny. Apparently, so Warner's brothers, they had a problem with it because they thought they might get in trouble, but apparently,
Yeah.
Punky said, "I don't care." He said Frank ran it by him and said, he was like, "Yeah, I don't care, Frank. That's fine. That's funny."
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah. So it's actually cool with Punky. He probably got some good publicity out of it too.
Right. It's just when I listen to this, it's just a lot going on. There's a lot of, it kind of reminds me of a lot of that era of Flo and Eddie, which I can't stand because there's not so much music as more like a comedy shtick. And I guess
But it's
I'm
not
much
as over
more,
the top as Flo and Eddie.
well, it kind of is.
Because they would be way over the top at times.
But see, based on side one already, I mean, how many times can I go back and listen to this? For me, I think I've listened to it and okay, I don't think I need to hear it again because I just rather hear when they're doing live stuff, Black Napkins, something like that, man. I could listen to that over and over again. But I think when you're doing a lot of these comedy things, I think that multiple listenings, it's like, God, I'm wore out now,
Maybe you need the edited version of the album, which is a lot shorter.
Maybe I do. But we haven't even got to side two, but side two is a different animal.
All right. Well, let's move
All right,
on
keep
then to
going.
the track 5 on this first disc. Honey, Don't You Want a Man Like Me? 4 minutes and 12 seconds. All right. So this song is about a song about how men are pigs and women enable them.
Well,
That's the best, probably the best way I can phrase that.
right.
This guy's a pig, treats her like crap, and she lets him get away with it. Anyway,
And on here on it says, "Honey, don't you want a man like me?" And just another love song.
so basically, the guy meets a girl at the bar. They go to dinner, then back to her place. He makes a move. She shoots him down. He leaves in a huff. She cries. He comes back because his car won't start. And then she gives him the reward that he's looking for. Won't say any more about it.
The other thing that I like on it, it says she was an office girl. Her name was Betty. Her favorite group was Helen Reddy.
Already. They discuss the weather.
That's classic. That
So,
is classic.
the song is not that long, like a little over 4 minutes, but man, there's a whole lot going on in this track. The choruses are this kind of a funky vamp. The verses are really this melodic da 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 with this complex fills in between each verse. And you got Ray and Frank. They're kind of doing some crooning here and there. Lots of tempo changes and themes throughout the track. Like I said, there's just a ton going on in this short period of time. I've always liked this track. Yeah,
I could be getting my tracks confused, but is this a track where they mentioned Roy Estrada? Like Roy should be singing that line?
no, that's coming up. That's the next track.
Okay.
Yeah,
But I
right.
kind of chuckled at that because, yeah, Frank was right. Yeah, Roy would be great on that.
So, all right. So let's get on to the last track of the first disc, the Illinois Enema Bandit. 12 minutes and 41 seconds. Once again, we get Don Pardo to start out with like a newsman type announcement where he's telling the story about Michael Kenyon, the Illinois Enema Bandit.
Which evidently, I guess, was a true story.
The true story about a guy from Champaign, Illinois. Apparently, there's a lot of sickos that live in Champaign, Illinois, and we'll have to ask DC if he agrees with that.
He probably knows someone. But evidently, the Enema Bandit terrorized co-eds at the University of Illinois for 10 years.
Yeah.
He pleaded guilty in Urbana, Illinois to 6 counts of armed robbery. He has admitted administrating enemas to women victims in at least 3 of 6 robberies. So that's the story. And
Yeah, and yeah, the whole newspaper clip I think is in the
yeah,
artwork
that's the
there,
clip.
right?
Mhm.
So you get Ray and Frank both singing on this album, this track, and really this is a blues song. Like I said, the lyrics are about his escapades, about robbing the women and performing the enemas. He pumps them up with his Illinois Enema Bandit juice. He eventually gets arrested. He goes to trial. They kind of reenact the trial a little bit, and those girls in the courtroom, they want him to go free because there's always at least one woman that wants the criminal to go free, and this really long guitar solo as well from Frank, and it's just a solid bluesy track. Subject matter is very weird but it's interesting. My wife always likes, "You're not going to play that Illinois Enema Bandit song, are you?" Yeah, that's kind of good.
Yeah, it says the little wanna enema postscript for Ray Estrada is a reference to his statement Roy made occasionally to Jimmy Carl Black in the Garrick Theater days. So that's what the reference is.
So we all know that Roy Estrada is serving life in prison he was arrested for pedophilia and got out years later, and then he got arrested a second time for pedophilia. So yeah, he's not the greatest dude. He's either in jail still or dead by now. So
I don't know. I haven't heard anything from him.
Oh.
I bet he's probably still in prison.
That's the end of disc 1. And
yeah, but by the end of disc 1, though, I had to take a break because it was a lot. It's a lot to deal with.
It's only 48 minutes, though.
I know, but there's just a lot of theater, a lot of
There's a lot of long tracks on that side,
yeah.
too. At least three or four fairly long songs on there. So disc 2, we're going to start out with I'm the Slime, 4 minutes and 24 seconds. Once again, this was only on the CD. This was originally on Overnight Sensation. They performed this on Saturday Night Live the same week, and they had Don Pardo kind of do the middle verses. During that performance, he shows up again here and he does the same kind of a deal. It's kind of funny to hear Don chime in and do it.
He does a wonderful job. Wonderful job. Because when
I do
he's
recommend
doing
people
it,
go watch YouTube for these old clips they've got these Saturday Night Live clips out there. Go ahead.
but Don totally throws his heart into it. It's like he's doing a performance. You know? It's wonderful. And you can just tell the interaction with Frank that Frank just loves it. He loves the fact that Don Pardo is on these tracks. He just loves it. Because they'll go, he'll say, take it away, Don. And then Don will go, take it away, Frank. Just great. I love that. Oh, it's wonderful. Anyway, keep going.
It's kind of sad that wasn't on the original vinyl then.
Yeah.
With Don on there. So the next track is going to be Pound for a Brown, 3 minutes and 41 seconds. Another CD only track.
Oh, this was wonderful though.
This was original Uncle Meat as well. Frank played this a lot live. He toured it quite a bit. Usually they extended it though when they would do it live with a lot of solos, but this one's a pretty short version. It's got a keyboard solo by Eddie and a nice little guitar solo. It's short and to the point. I think it's pretty good. It's got a different feel than the Uncle Meat version, of course, because it's this is the 70s. There's more synthesizers and.
I almost didn't recognize this arrangement of it, but it's very fresh. I think what Eddie brings to it. Actually, it's a wonderful instrumental. I'm just going to leave it at that. I love it.
Track 3, Manx Needs Women. Only 1 minute and 51 seconds. Okay, instrumental. Okay, this, I wrote a bunch of adjectives for this. It's atonal, dissonant, changing meters, aggressive, complex, challenging to listen to. Is Frank a genius or a madman? I know a little. I know a little music theory, but I never studied it seriously, so I really don't know sometimes.
Well,
I don't know how he comes up with this.
It mentions here this was an arrangement of an exercise published in Guitar Player magazine. So
I remember reading that.
It's got some alterations and some additions, but it must have meant something. Well, if it was in Guitar Player, it was made for exercises for guitar players to work their fingers out or whatever. So that's probably why it's so crazy.
All right, so we're going to get into the Black Page drum solo and the Black Page number 1, 3 minutes and 51 seconds. So this was a drum solo that Frank originally wrote as a test piece for drummers to see if they could do it.
Like if he's trying out somebody?
Kind of, yeah. He originally wrote it, and first person he gave it to was Terry, because Terry was in the band at that time. And Terry said he sat down, and every time they'd have a rehearsal, he'd usually get there a little early, and he'd spend about 15 minutes on it. It took him about 2 weeks to finally get it down. But it's full of regular rhythmic groupings. Ruth actually I think she did some overdubs in the studio of the solo, because it's a live drum solo, but Ruth did probably some marimba or stuff overdubs on there. Eventually, Frank then added a medley and some chord changes to the rhythms. Mm-hmm. And that became the Black Page number 1. So that's very hard to play as well by the band. So what you have here is the drum solo, and then that leads into the Black Page number 1.
Yeah, it's very unusual. But so it's only 3 minutes and 50 seconds. It's not very long,
We have a lot of short pieces here that kind of segueing together in some ways. The side really moves a lot more than the first side.
Oh, 100%. Yeah. So I was going to say this side's a lot easier to. It's not like I said, I almost had to break up side 1 to take it all in. This side, though, I think flows a lot better musically. and it's not as because really you have to really listen to side one. There's a lot to listen to take in. This side you can just kind of listen to it and take it in a lot easier. It's not
Yeah,
quite as extensive.
yeah. There's just some shorter things here that are a lot more accessible, which gets us to the next track, Big Leg Emma. Very accessible
Yeah.
and very short, 2 minutes and 17 seconds. Okay, this originally was a single from 1967 by the Mothers of Inventions that flopped. Okay, it's a bonus track on the absolutely free CD. We talked about that on our first episode, I think, when we did that and Freak Out, how this was a bonus track. This version's faster, heavier, really swings too.
Yeah, it doesn't really even sound like the original. It's a totally different interpretation of it. Yeah, it
Yeah,
swings. It's fast.
lots of horns on this too. It just swings. It's like this 12 bar blues that swings, and a lot of group vocals on this. I mean, it's really good, very enjoyable to listen to. So yeah, I like it a lot. Then that leads us into Sofa at 256. We last heard this on One Size Fits All.
Mhm.
It's going to show up in future albums. Frank really liked this track. It's just a beautiful instrumental with a lot of good sounding horns and some real smoking guitar licks on this version too. I really like. And what else you got to that?
Well, I was going to say in the notes here it says an arousing waltz originally released on the album One Size Fits All. Since that album was not very popular, this presentation might guide a few curious listeners back into the direction to check it out.
That's probably his best album too, really. One Size Fits All. Most people consider, well, a lot of people consider that.
A lot of people, well, I can't argue with that. It's one of them. But I don't know. What do you think of this? What do you think of this version?
I love it. The version on One Size Fits All is really good too, though.
Yeah.
This one seems to have a little more of an edge as far as the guitars go, and a little more horns too, but both real solid.
Yeah, I think it's great. Back page number 2, 536.
Yeah.
And once again, our theme reorchestrated, rhythmically modified, and set up to a cheap little disco vamp against which the polyrhythmic God, I can't say all this. Anomalies. Jesus. I'm going to try that again. All right. So we got 3, 2, 1. So we come up to black page number 2, which is 536. It says here, and once again, our theme reorchestrated, rhythmically modified, and set up to a cheap little disco vamp against which polyrhythmic anomalies, Jesus, become yet more enchanting. Yeah. And it's quick. What do you think of that?
He wrote this so that the average teenager could appreciate the black page. Is one thing I don't know if it's written in there anywhere, but that's what I had read. Because it was just the black page number 1, or the drums and the drum solo were just too statistically dense for the average listener, he felt.
So this is like the answer to black page number 1. So it's a little bit more I'm going to use the word commercial, but a little bit more accessible to the listener.
Yeah, and he's like you said, he's set to a disco vamp to allow the average fan to appreciate it, but it's still a pretty complex track, which then leads us to The Torture Never Stops, 12 and a half minutes, only on the CD though. This was on the last album, Zoo to Lures, which we talked about. Frank used to love to do this live. This is very similar to the original, but Frank really stretches out his solos on this version.
It has to be one of the best solos, I think, on the record. I mean, he stretches out. You can feel the emotion. You can just feel this version of this track, I think, is really, I mean, I think this whole side 2 really just is almost perfection when I listen to it. But this version of Torture Never Stops, holy crap, highly recommend it.
Yeah, that was a really good live vehicle for him to play that track because, like you said, he would just stretch it out. And it set a really good mood to the whole. It's got that torture chamber, spooky feel to it, dungeon type thing. So he liked to play that live. So then that gets us to the last track,
Purple
which
Lagoon.
was side 4 of the vinyl. And it's
Yeah, it's
Purple Lagoon.
16 minutes and 40
Yeah.
seconds.
Purple Lagoon / Approximate. So Approximate was a song that was first played live a couple years before. But the beginning of this side, it's actually, there's this real fast bass part that, Patrick's playing. It's just really fast. That's then leads into another instrumental section, and that's basically the Purple Lagoon. At about 35 seconds in is when Approximate starts. And then we get some solos after that sound like they were kind of all, it kind of sounds like it was pieced together from multiple shows. Could have been. First, we get a sax solo. I'm assuming it's Michael Brecker.
It's really Michael Brecker, 100%.
And then we get a Frank guitar solo. And then we get a little bit of guitar and sax solos together. Go ahead.
It mentions that guitar solo was overdubbed during the concert because there was no solo during the show. So Frank added that later. But it works. It's perfect.
Yeah, he was good at doing that kind of stuff. I didn't study the notes close enough in the credits probably for this. But then we get into a bass solo by Patrick. Solid. And then we get a trumpet solo with a really strange sounding effect. That's probably Randy.
Yeah, it is.
Okay.
Randy did the trumpet solo.
Okay. Yeah, the trumpet's got a strange sound to it. I don't know if it's being doubled somehow or whatever. It just has a weird sound to it.
It could be doubled.
So then for like the last minute or so, it returns back to Approximate, and then we get some more of that real fast bass playing by Patrick at the end.
Yeah, what do you think of that bass solo from Patrick?
He's playing some incredibly fast, at least at the beginning and at the very end. I can't remember much about the solo in between.
Mm-hmm.
You're the bassist. So.
Yeah, I think it's great. He's very fast runs. I was totally blown away by his playing because he never played anything like that in Missing Persons. So, man, to hear him stretch out on all this stuff, excellent.
That was an entirely different band.
Totally different band. But someone in the comments wants us to do Missing Persons. Wants us to tackle that. Could just do that on the show. I don't know your knowledge on Missing Persons, but it's been requested.
I used to own the first album, which I liked a lot, but I'd never really listened to anything else. So there's one other comment I was going to make about the Purple Lagoon Approximate was they also played that on Saturday Night Live.
Different arrangement.
And during the song, John Belushi came out as a samurai bebop saxophonist. So he's got his hair up thing. He's wearing his robe thing, and he's got this saxophone. I think it's got a microphone on it too, and he's doing like bebop stuff and just making weird noises and stuff. And Frank's kind of doing his conducting of the band and whatnot. And so people need to go check that out. It's very interesting. But that really wraps up the album there.
Yeah. Well, what would
Sorry about my coughing, people, but
that's all right. They'll be
we made it.
Well, you were coughing through Steve Vai. You're coughing through this.
That was a week ago tonight.
And you're still sick.
Yep.
It took me a week to get that show out. Jesus. All right. Cool. Well, what would I give it? Yeah, that's tough. I love side 2. Side 1, I think it's great if you break it up. Listen to it in pieces. I would be happy to give this a 7 out of 10. I know it sounds low, but it reminds me so much of that Flo and Eddie stuff. And it's some of it's a tough listen.
I'm going with a 9. I love it.
Okay.
Love it. I like it more than I liked it 6 months ago.
Really?
Yeah.
All right. I'm going with the 7. I hope that I have to start listening to that Philadelphia. I hope I like it better.
Yeah, I don't. It's a different animal. And I want to save that also.
Well, it must
wanna
be
ruin it.
decent because it was released. I mean, someone in the Zappa Trust decided it needed to come out.
It's a very There's something very special about that show, and I'll
Would
save it for it's the
the
Philly
Philly
show.
show?
Yeah, there's something very special about. Well, yeah, I mean it's a yeah. I don't want to say anymore.
All right. Well,
But yeah, there's some things different about that show than this show, which is good. It's not the same show. There's not a lot of the same songs, and there's some things different about it. Although that Philly show doesn't have the Saturday Night Live band, and have the Brecker Brothers. It doesn't have Punky's Whips. There's some differences, but it's got Black Napkins, which is a
and I
whole
do
big
love
deal.
that. That's a big deal.
And if that would have been on here as well, holy shit!
Yeah, Black
I don't want
Napkins.
to say too much though. Don't want to say
Okay.
too much more.
Well, we'll be looking at that on Thursday, so I'm sure you'll be 100% for that. We might do
At
that
least
live.
I'll be closer.
I have to see
You
what's
probably
happening.
release this one first, though.
Well,
if you-
I could get this out for tomorrow. I can get it up there.
Because it'd be best to see this first. Because I think I'm going to probably have more to say tonight than I would say in the next show,
Okay.
and they kind of go like
All right.
kind of hand in
I'll
hand.
get this up tomorrow so we have it for Thursday. But we're just talking one record. It's easy to get this together. It's not like those shows where I'm doing all these graphics and cranking something out. You know what I mean?
I'm
So
thinking
I'm
next
going to go with a 7. I'm happy with a 7.
and I said 9. I think next episode we were going to probably do at least Studio Tan. Maybe we might combine.
We
2
can
albums.
combine. Do you want to combine?
We might.
So
what's
Studio
the-
Tan.
Definitely
and
Studio Tan. Maybe Sleep Dirt. That comes next after that.
I say combine them.
I got to
No?
talk to you about Sleep Dirt before off air. But
Oh, okay. Well, we might combine them, ladies. and
wrap
gentlemen.
this up.
All right. So anyway, we'll wrap this dog up. Please let us know what you think of Frank Zappa in New York. So we'll get this up and then we'll have a discussion about the Philly show here. And Anthony Ferraro will be joining us for that. So it's kind of going out of order, but then again, it's not. But it is. But that's all right. So
It'll slide in.
we'll slide it in. All right. Anything else you need to mention, Byron, before we wrap this dog up?
We got Cheap Trick on Sunday, right?
Cheap Trick on Sunday. Be doing a listening party then. Tomorrow, well, Wednesday night, I'll be doing a listening party because there's no Contrarians live chat. So I'm filling it with a listening party. And already started it out. I've already started working on it. It's going to be good. A little bit of Hagar and Shone and the April wine. Get ready, ladies and gentlemen. It's going to be good. All right. Anything else? Let's wrap it up. All right, Byron, thanks for doing this. We will see you for Studio Tan next and whatever we come up with. Well, actually, we'll see you for, I don't know what I'm saying. I guess I need to go to bed.
Got a lot coming.
I got a lot coming up. All right, everybody. We'll see you. Take it easy.